A stubborn cow leads reclusive ex-journalist Elena Marsh to 16 Nazi-looted paintings buried on her mountain property, worth $80 million and belonging to an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor. 4 years ago, Elena's exposé on corruption cost her career and possibly her source's life. Now she faces an impossible choice: return the art and risk the powerful enemies who destroyed her, or stay hidden and betray everything she once believed. When a ruthless art dealer makes threats disguised as offers, Elena must decide if bearing witness matters more than survival, and whether redemption is possible for someone who spent years learning not to care. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October morning arrived cold and crystalline, the kind of mountain dawn that made Elena Marsh grateful she'd left the world behind. She stood on her cabin's porch, coffee steaming in her chapped hands, watching Bess meander through the high meadow with the aimless determination only a 15-year-old cow could manage. "Stay where I can see you," Elena called, though Bess had never listened to her in all the years since Elena had inherited both the cow and this isolated property from her grandmother. But this morning, Bess had other plans. Elena watched with growing irritation as the rust-colored jersey disappeared over the ridge, heading toward the upper meadow, where the grazing was sparse and the ground treacherous with hidden sinkholes left from old mining operations. Her grandmother had warned her about that section. "Stay clear. Too dangerous. The earth isn't solid there, damn it." "Bess!" Elena set down her coffee and grabbed her work jacket, shoving her feet into boots she'd been meaning to replace for 2 years. The walk up took 20 minutes, her breath coming harder than it should have. 4 years of mountain living hadn't made her younger, just more isolated. She was 43 now, though some days she felt ancient, and other days she felt like the scared 39-year-old who'd fled Philadelphia with nothing but a duffel bag and her grandmother's final gift: this cabin, this land, this escape. She found Bess standing motionless in a spot where the ground dipped unnaturally, her massive head lowered, snuffling at something Elena couldn't see. "What have you got there, girl?" Bess didn't move, just stood stubborn as stone, her hooves planted at the edge of what looked like a partial collapse in the earth, a depression about 4 feet across where the soil had given way to reveal darkness beneath. Elena approached carefully, testing each step. The ground felt solid enough, but her grandmother's warnings echoed. She knelt beside the depression, pulling away loose dirt and dead grass. The hole went deeper than she'd thought, revealing what looked like mortared stone, a wall of some kind, or a ceiling that had caved in. "What is this?" she murmured, more to herself than to Bess. Her journalist's instincts, the ones she'd tried to bury along with her career, stirred like something waking from hibernation. She had tools in her truck. She could excavate this, just a little, just to see. 2 hours later, Elena's hands were raw and her back ached, but she'd cleared enough debris to reveal what lay beneath: a metal lockbox, military style, roughly 2 feet by 3 feet, its olive-drab paint eaten away by rust and time. The thing was heavy. She needed Bess's harness and her truck's winch to pull it free. By the time she got it loaded, the sun had climbed high, and Elena's isolation suddenly felt less like safety and more like exposure. She kept looking over her shoulder as she drove the rutted path back to her cabin, as if someone might be watching her discovery. Inside, she set the box on her kitchen table, studying it. No markings she could discern through the corrosion. The lock had rusted into uselessness. She tried prying it with a crowbar, then with her grandfather's old chisel. And finally, desperate and knowing she was probably destroying evidence of something, she attacked the hinges with a hacksaw. The lid came free with a groan of protesting. Metal Elena stopped breathing. Inside, wrapped in what looked like military-issue canvas, were packages, 16 of them, each about the size of a large book. The canvas had protected them from moisture, though it had taken on a musty, ancient smell. Her hands shook as she lifted the first package. lighter than she'd expected. She unwrapped it slowly, careful despite her hammering heart, peeling back layers of protective cloth until, oh God, a painting. Small, perhaps 14 inches square, the colors still vibrant despite decades underground. Water lilies floating on a dark pond, rendered in quick, confident brushstrokes. Even Elena, who'd never studied art formally, recognized the style Monet. This was a Monet. She set it down with excessive care, her mind racing through possibilities and probabilities, none of them good. This wasn't someone's hidden family heirloom. This was something else entirely. Something that ended up buried in a lockbox on a remote mountain for a reason, with methodical precision. And there it was again, that old journalist training taking over. Elena unwrapped each painting, photographing them with her phone, handling them with dish towels when her hands grew too sweaty. After the Monet came what might have been a Klimt. Then works she couldn't identify, but which radiated the same aura of significance. A portrait, a landscape, abstract geometrics that reminded her of Kandinsky. 16 paintings, all small enough to be portable, all clearly valuable, all hidden away like secrets that could kill. By evening, Elena's laptop glowed in the darkening cabin, her search history a damning trail. Art stolen World War II, Nazi-looted paintings, provenance research, restitution law. The rabbit hole went deep and dark. Jewish families, their collections catalogued by Nazi officers before being systematically stolen. Millions of items taken, most never recovered. Ongoing legal battles. Descendants searching for family treasures that were all they had left of murdered parents and grandparents. Elena's coffee had gone cold hours ago. Bess lowed softly from her small barn, probably wondering why she hadn't been brought in yet. The paintings stared at Elena from her kitchen table, witnesses to something terrible, something that demanded response. She could bury the box again, pretend she never found it. Go back to her careful, small, invisible life, where she hurt no one and no one hurt her, but she was looking at someone's stolen memories. Someone's parents' taste, their wealth, their love of beauty, all of it ripped away and hidden. These weren't just valuable objects. They were witnesses. Elena reached for her phone, then stopped. Once she made that call, once she invited the world back into her life, there would be no retreat. The woman who'd destroyed her career, who'd driven her into hiding, would know where she was. The colleagues who'd betrayed her would see her name again. Everyone would know. She looked at the Monet, at the water lilies that had survived decades in darkness. "Damn it," Elena whispered, and reached for her phone. Elena didn't sleep that first night, or the second, or the third. Her cabin, usually a sanctuary of deliberate emptiness, transformed into something resembling her old newsroom in its final. Frantic days, papers scattered across every surface, her laptop glowing until dawn. The printer she'd barely used in 4 years, churning out article after article about Nazi art looting, restitution law, provenance research, and the decades-long battles waged by Holocaust survivors and their descendants. The paintings lay on her kitchen table, still wrapped except for the Monet she'd propped against her flower canister. In the weak light of her desk lamp, the water lilies seemed to accuse her of something she couldn't quite name. By the second morning, Elena had assembled a timeline. The systematic looting began in 1933, accelerated through Kristallnacht, became industrialized alongside the murder itself. Special units, the ERR, the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, catalogued Jewish collections with bureaucratic precision before stealing everything. Families were given receipts for their confiscated property, as if legality mattered when the law itself had become a weapon. She found herself reading survivor testimonies at 3 a.m, tears streaming down her face as she learned about families who'd hidden paintings in walls, buried them in gardens, entrusted them to neighbors who sometimes kept them and sometimes turned the families in for reward money. The coffee maker ran constantly. Bess's feeding schedule became erratic. Elena forgot to eat until her hands started shaking. On the third night, she identified a signature on one of the portraits, a small, elegant GK in the corner. Gustav Klimt. She cross-referenced it against databases of stolen art and found a match, listed as missing, presumed destroyed, last known owner the Rosenbaum family of Vienna. Seized 1938, the Rosenbaum family. Elena dug deeper. Maximilian Rosenbaum, banker and art patron. Sarah Rosenbaum, his wife, who'd hosted salons for artists and intellectuals. 3 children, Jacob, Rachel and Margaret. The parents died in Mauthausen. Jacob died in Auschwitz. Rachel died in Ravensbrück. Only Margaret survived, hidden by Catholic neighbors. Later emigrated to America. Elena stared at the portrait, a young woman with dark eyes and a slight smile, probably painted in the 1920s, someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's mother maybe, stolen along with the family who'd loved her image enough to commission it. She pushed back from her laptop and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting them in shades of rose and gold. Beautiful, indifferent, the world kept turning while she sat in her cabin with stolen memories spread across her kitchen table. The moral calculus should have been simple. Call the authorities. Return the paintings to their rightful owners or heirs. Do the right thing. But Elena had done the right thing before, in Philadelphia, and it had destroyed her. She'd uncovered corruption in the city's housing authority, officials taking bribes, falsifying inspections, letting buildings decay while children got lead poisoning. She'd done everything right. Verified sources, documented evidence, gave officials opportunities to respond. Her editor had praised the work. The paper had run the series. Then her primary source turned up dead in an apparent suicide. Then the lawsuit started. Then her editor, facing pressure from the paper's board, revealed that he'd harbored concerns about Elena's methods all along. Her colleagues, the ones she'd trusted, had stayed silent or actively distanced themselves. The story was true. That never mattered. What mattered was that powerful people wanted it buried, and Elena was easier to destroy than the truth was to acknowledge. She'd lost her career, her reputation, her fiancé, who couldn't handle being associated with that reporter. She'd fled to her grandmother's cabin and spent 4 years teaching herself not to care, not to investigate, not to ask questions that brought the world's attention. And now here she was, holding evidence of crimes so vast they'd nearly destroyed an entire people. If she came forward, she'd be exposed again. The people who'd destroyed her career would know where she was. Media would descend. Questions would be asked. Why did she wait? What else was she hiding? Was she trying to profit? Elena could already write the headlines. Disgraced reporter claims Nazi art discovery. Another publicity stunt. She could sell them. The thought arrived unbidden and unwelcome, but she couldn't dismiss it. 16 paintings, conservatively worth, what, 10 million? 50 million? More? She could contact private collectors, move them quietly, disappear with enough money to never worry again. Except she'd spent 3 nights reading about families torn apart, about children who grew old, searching for some trace of their murdered parents. She'd seen photographs of elderly survivors weeping over recovered paintings because they remembered their mothers hanging them in dining rooms, their fathers discussing the brushwork over dinner. These weren't just valuable objects. They were witnesses, the last physical connection between the dead and those who mourned them. Elena made coffee she didn't drink and watched the sun climb higher. She could make an anonymous tip, send the photographs to authorities and leave them on her porch. Let someone else handle it. Safe, invisible, no consequences. But that was cowardice, dressed up as prudence. She knew it. Her grandmother would have known it too, Grandma Rose, who'd sheltered draft resistors during Vietnam, who'd faced down developers trying to force her off this land, who'd told Elena on her deathbed, being scared is fine, honey. Letting fear make your choices isn't. At noon, Eleanor walked outside and stood in her meadow, looking at the spot where Bess had found the box. The earth had already started settling back into place, nature reclaiming the disturbance. How easy it would be to bury it all again, return to the comfortable numbness of isolation. She thought about Margaret Rosenbaum. if she was still alive. 87 years old, probably, if she'd survived everything that came after survival. Did she remember these paintings? Did she dream about them? Did she tell her children and grandchildren about the portrait of her mother that hung in their Vienna apartment, wondering if it still existed somewhere? Elena went back inside and stood before the Klimt portrait, studying the young woman's face. Someone had loved her. Someone had wanted to preserve her beauty. Someone had died before they could see this painting again. "I can't do this," Elena whispered to the empty cabin. "I can't go through that again." But even as she said it, she was reaching for her phone, pulling up the FBI website, finding the number for their art crime team. Her hand trembled over the screen. One call would change everything, would destroy the fragile peace she'd built, would expose her to exactly the kind of scrutiny and judgment that had broken her before. She looked at the paintings, all 16 of them, wrapped in canvas, survivors of decades underground. They'd waited this long. They could wait longer while she decided. Elena set down the phone, then she picked it up again, then set it down. The sun tracked across her cabin floor. Bess lowed from the barn, patient and uncomplaining. The mountains stood silent and eternal outside her windows. Finally, as afternoon shadows lengthened, Elena lifted her phone and dialed. "FBI Art Crime Team," a bored voice answered. "How may I direct your call?" Elena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I found something. Paintings. I think they might be Nazi-looted art." There was a pause. "Ma'am, we receive a lot of calls like this." "I have 16 paintings," Elena interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in her voice now that she'd started. "Including what I believe is a Klimt portrait and a Monet. They were buried in a military lockbox on my property. I have photographs. I think I know who they belong to." Another pause, longer this time. "Ma'am, please don't handle the items further. Can you give me your name and location?" Elena closed her eyes. This was it. The moment she stepped back into the light and let the world see her again. "My name is Elena Marsh," she said. "And I'm not calling for a reward or publicity. I'm calling because these paintings belong to someone else. Someone who deserves to know they survived." Special Agent Cole Brennan was deeply skeptical. In his 15 years with the FBI's art crime team, he'd fielded hundreds of calls from people convinced they'd found masterpieces in their attics, barns, or deceased relatives' storage units. 95% turned out to be worthless reproductions or wishful thinking. 3% were legitimate but minor pieces. 2% were worth investigating seriously. This call, though, this Elena Marsh woman with her careful documentation and her claim of finding paintings buried in a military lockbox, landed somewhere between categories 2 and 3. Interesting enough to pursue, but probably a dead end. Then she'd sent the photographs. Cole had stared at his computer screen for a full minute. Zoomed in on the Klimt portrait, the Monet water lilies, what looked like an early Kandinsky abstraction. If these were forgeries, they were excellent ones. If they were authentic, he'd made the call to his supervisor, booked a flight, and within 48 hours was driving a rental SUV up a mountain road that barely qualified as navigable, accompanied by 2 junior agents and enough authentication equipment to fill the vehicle's cargo area. "This is insane," Agent Martinez muttered from the back seat as they hit another pothole. "She's probably running a scam. With what motive?" Cole asked, navigating around a fallen branch. "She didn't ask for money. She didn't call media. She specifically said she wants the paintings returned to their rightful owners. Maybe that's the scam," Martinez suggested. "Get us up here, claim we damaged them or stole them, sue the Bureau." Cole didn't answer. He'd read Elena Marsh's background on the flight. Former investigative journalist in Philadelphia, solid reputation until a housing corruption story had somehow blown up in her face. Sources recanted, editor turned on her, the whole ugly dance of powerful people protecting themselves. She disappeared 4 years ago, apparently to this remote property in Maine. Either she was trying to rebuild credibility with a spectacular find, or she was genuinely someone who'd learned to stay invisible and was forcing herself back into visibility for the right reasons. They pulled up to a small cabin that looked like it belonged in a Winslow. Homer painting, weathered wood, stone chimney surrounded by meadow and forest. A rust-colored cow watched them from a modest barn structure. No other buildings, no neighbors visible in any direction. Elena Marsh emerged from the cabin before they'd even parked, and Cole's first thought was, she looks terrified. She was tall, lean in the way of people who forgot to eat regularly, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that assessed them with evident wariness. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, hands shoved in her pockets, shoulders slightly hunched as if braced for attack. "Ms. Marsh?" Cole got out, displaying his credentials. "Special Agent Cole Brennan, FBI Art Crime Team. These are Agents Martinez and Chen. You made good time." Elena's voice was controlled but tight. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. When someone calls about potential Nazi-looted art, we move quickly." Cole studied her, trying to read the situation. "May we see the paintings?" Elena hesitated, looking past them at the government vehicles as if regretting every decision that had led to this moment. "They're inside. I haven't touched them since we spoke except to re-wrap them. And I've been sleeping with my door locked. Worried someone else knows about them?" Martinez asked, her tone slightly accusatory. "Worried I'm crazy for inviting federal agents to my property when I've spent 4 years specifically avoiding anything that brings attention," Elena shot back. "But yes, also worried. This is 15 miles from the nearest town. If someone wanted to break in..." She trailed off, then seemed to physically gather herself. "Follow me. And please don't track mud inside. This is my home, not a crime scene." "Actually, ma'am, it might be exactly a crime scene," Chen said. "If these paintings are stolen property, they're not stolen by me," Elena interrupted sharply. "I found them buried on land that's been in my family for 3 generations. Whatever crime happened decades ago." Cole stepped between them. "Let's just see what we're dealing with. Ms. Marsh, lead the way. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside, the cabin was Spartan, but surprisingly organized given the circumstances. Papers covered every surface, printed articles, notes, hand-drawn maps, and timelines. A laptop sat open to what looked like a Holocaust restitution database. The kitchen table held 16 canvas-wrapped packages, meticulously labeled with numbers and descriptions, and there, propped against the counter, where morning light caught it perfectly, was the Klimt portrait. Cole stopped breathing. He'd seen photographs, but they hadn't captured the way the paint caught the light, the subtle gold leaf work in the background, the distinctive style that was unmistakably Klimt. If this was a forgery, it was the best he'd ever seen. "Jesus," Martinez whispered. "Moving closer. Don't touch it," Elena said sharply. "I've only handled them with gloves or dish towels. I don't know proper protocol, but I know enough not to contaminate them with skin oils." Cole tore his gaze from the portrait to look at Elena. "You said you researched the provenance." "The Rosenbaum family." Elena moved to her laptop, pulled up a document. "Maximilian and Sarah Rosenbaum of Vienna. This portrait," she gestured at the Klimt, "matches one listed in pre-war insurance records as part of their collection. Seized by Nazi authorities in 1938, listed as missing, presumed destroyed in post-war restitution files." She handed Cole a printed page showing a grainy pre-war photograph of an elegant apartment, the Klimt portrait visible on one wall. "The family?" Cole asked quietly. "Parents died in concentration camps. 2 of their 3 children. One survived, Margaret Rosenbaum, the youngest daughter. She would be 87 now. I didn't contact her. I thought that should come through official channels." Cole studied Elena's face, seeing the exhaustion, the barely controlled anxiety, but also something else. A fierce protectiveness. "You've been researching all of them? All 16 paintings?" 13 link back to the Rosenbaums. 2 might be from a different family. The provenance is less clear. When I can't identify at all." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "I have documentation. I took photographs before touching anything. I can show you exactly where I found the lockbox. Martinez was examining the other wrapped paintings, carefully lifting corners to peek. If these are authentic, we're looking at roughly $80 million, Elena said flatly. Conservative estimate. More if you account for the historical significance and the fact that everyone assumed they were destroyed. Chen whistled low. That's one hell of a finder's fee. Elena's expression hardened. I don't want a finder's fee. I want them returned to whoever they belong to. These aren't treasures, Agent Chen. They're evidence of genocide. They belong to the Rosenbaum family or their descendants, not to me, and certainly not to anyone who thinks this is some kind of lucky break. Cole felt his assessment shifting. This wasn't a scam. This was a woman who'd found something that terrified her and was doing the right thing, despite obvious personal cost. Ms. Marsh, he said carefully, I need to ask, why did you wait 3 days to contact us? Elena's laugh was bitter. Because the last time I did the right thing and called authorities about corruption I'd uncovered, it destroyed my career, my reputation, and my life. Because inviting federal scrutiny when you're someone the media has already decided is unreliable feels like volunteering for execution. Because, she stopped, visibly struggling, because I'm scared, Agent Brennan. I'm scared of what happens when people know I'm here and what I've found. I'm scared of becoming a story again instead of a person. And I'm scared that doing the right thing will cost me everything I've rebuilt. But I'm apparently not coward enough to bury the paintings and pretend I never found them. The cabin fell silent, except for the ticking of an old wall clock. I need to make some calls, Cole said finally. We'll need to bring in an authentication expert, Dr. Harrison Webb, if he's available. We'll need to examine the site where you found them. And Ms. Marsh, I need to be honest. Once this goes into official channels, your privacy is going to be compromised. Media will find out. Questions will be asked. I know. Elena's voice was small. I've spent 3 nights not sleeping, weighing privacy against doing what's right. Turns out I'm not as good at selfishness as I'd hoped. Cole found himself wanting to reassure her, which was unusual. He'd learned not to get emotionally involved in cases. But there was something in Elena Marsh's frightened defiance that resonated. She was doing something brave, despite being obviously terrified. And that was worth acknowledging. We'll do our best to protect your privacy where we can, he said. And for what it's worth, Ms. Marsh, you made the right call. Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Ask me again when this is over, if I still think so. Outside, a truck rumbled up the drive, and Elena's expression shifted from anxious to alarmed. That's Tommy. He delivers firewood. He can't see, but it was too late. A lean man in his 50s climbed out of a battered pickup, froze when he saw the government vehicles, then strode toward the cabin with clear protective intent. Elena, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm fine, Tommy. These are FBI agents, I called them. It's complicated. Tommy looked from Elena to Cole, his jaw tight. FBI, what the hell? Mr. Vickers, I presume. Cole extended a hand that Tommy ignored. We're here at Ms. Marsh's request regarding a discovery on her property. What kind of discovery requires 3 federal agents? The kind that's none of your concern, Martinez said coolly. Tommy's expression darkened. Anything involving Elena is my concern. Geez, Tommy! Elena's voice carried a warning. I appreciate it, but I'm fine, really. They're not here to arrest me or cause trouble. I found something, I reported it, they're investigating. That's all. That's all. Tommy stared at her. Elena, you've barely spoken to another human being in 4 years, except me and the grocery store clerk. Now you've got 3 FBI agents in your cabin? That's all. Elena's discomfort was palpable. Can we talk about this later, please? Cole watched the interaction with interest. Tommy Vickers clearly had feelings for Elena that went well beyond friendly concern, and Elena either didn't notice or was deliberately ignoring them. One more complication in what was already becoming a complex situation. Ms. Marsh has been very cooperative, Cole said, trying to diffuse the tension. We'll be here for a few days, conducting our investigation, but she's not in any trouble. Tommy didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly. I'll be around, Elena, if you need anything. I know. Thank you. After Tommy left, Shooting dark looks over his shoulder, Elena slumped against the counter. This is already becoming a circus, isn't it? When Cole and my quiet life is over, it was over the moment you opened that lockbox, Cole said, not unkindly. The question now is whether we can give these paintings back to their rightful owner before this becomes a media feeding frenzy. Elena looked at the Klimt portrait, at the young woman frozen in elegant stillness, preserved through decades of darkness and theft. Then I suggest we work fast, she said. Because I have a feeling once the world finds out about this, things are going to get complicated in ways we can't even predict yet. Cole followed her gaze to the portrait and silently acknowledged that she was probably right. Dr. Harrison. Webb arrived the next morning in a car service driven by a patient man who'd clearly made this trip before. The elderly art historian emerged from the vehicle like someone half his age. Despite the cane he carried, there was vitality in his movements, eagerness in his expression. He was 83, Cole had learned, and still the foremost expert on Nazi looted art in the Western Hemisphere. Agent Brennan, Webb called, spotting Cole near the cabin. Your photographs didn't do them justice. Where's our reluctant hero? Elena emerged from the cabin, looking like she'd spent another sleepless night. I'm not a hero, Dr. Webb. I'm just the person who happened to have a nosy cow. Webb's laugh was warm and genuine. My dear, history is made by people who happen upon things and choose not to ignore them. Now may I see these remarkable survivors? Inside, Webb's demeanor shifted from friendly to reverent. He approached the table where the paintings lay with the careful intensity of someone entering sacred space. Cole watched as the old historian's hands, still steady despite his age, reached for the first canvas wrapper. UV lamp. Please, Webb murmured, and Chen hurried to set up the equipment they'd brought. For the next 3 hours, Webb examined each painting with microscopic attention. He used ultraviolet light to check for modern materials that would indicate forgery. He studied brushwork with magnifying equipment. He consulted leather-bound reference books he'd brought from his personal library, muttering in German, occasionally, as he cross-referenced signatures and techniques. Elena watched from the corner, arms wrapped around herself, looking simultaneously fascinated and terrified by the process. Tommy had returned despite being asked to leave, parking himself outside the cabin like an unofficial guard. Webb reached the third painting, a small portrait, intimate in scale, and stopped. He leaned closer, studying something in the background details. Then, to everyone's surprise, the elderly historian's shoulders began to shake. Dr. Webb. Cole moved closer. Are you all right? I know this painting. Webb's voice was thick with emotion. I've seen photographs of it in albums preserved by survivors. This hung in the Rosenbaum apartment in Vienna, in the music room where Sarah Rosenbaum hosted salons. I never thought. We all believed it was destroyed. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his eyes, unashamed of his tears. Forgive me. You spent decades researching lost art, documenting theft, imagining these pieces as abstractions, items on lists, insurance claims, black and white photographs. Then you stand in front of the actual object and realize someone loved this. Someone hung it in their home and saw it every day. Someone died without knowing what happened to it. Elena's expression crumbled slightly, her carefully maintained composure cracking. The Rosenbaums. Can you tell me about them? Webb nodded, composing himself. Maximilian Rosenbaum was a banker, but his real passion was art. He and his wife Sarah built their collection over 30 years of marriage. They didn't just buy pieces as investments, they bought what they loved, what moved them. Sarah was particularly fond of Klimt. They knew him socially before his death. He gestured at the portrait Elena had unwrapped first. This depicts Sarah herself, commissioned in 1924 for their 15th wedding anniversary. It's listed in Klimt's catalogue raisonné as Portrait of Mrs. R. Presumed Destroyed. That's her. Eleanor moved closer, studying the painting with new eyes. Margaret's mother? Yes. Sarah died in Ravensbrück concentration camp in 1943. Maximilian died in Mauthausen in 1942. Two of their children, Jacob and Rachel, perished in Auschwitz. Only the youngest, Margaret, survived. She was hidden by Catholic neighbors, the Kreutzberg family, in their cellar for 2 years. Webb pulled out a worn folder from his bag, extracted a photograph. This was taken in 1936, at a gallery opening. The photograph showed a family, a distinguished older man with a grey beard, a beautiful woman in an elegant dress, and 3 children. The youngest, a dark-haired girl of perhaps 9, leaned against her mother's side. Elena took the photograph with trembling hands. Margaret. She emigrated to America in 1947, married a nice Jewish boy from Brooklyn, built a life. I met her once, about 20 years ago, when I was researching the Rosenbaum collection. She told me she'd made peace with never recovering her family's art. The paintings had become symbols to her, representations of everything stolen. She didn't expect them to exist anymore. Is Margaret still alive? Elena asked softly. Webb smiled. Very much so. She'll be 87 next month. Lives in Manhattan, still sharp as a tack. She has children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren even. The family Hitler tried to erase has flourished despite him. Cole watched Elena absorb this information, saw the moment it transformed the paintings from valuable objects into something else entirely, stolen pieces of a family's life that could impossibly be returned. We need to contact her, Elena said. Soon, before media gets wind of this and she finds out from a news report. Agreed, Cole said. But first, Dr. Webb, what's your professional assessment? Are these authentic? Webb returned to the table, moved through the remaining paintings with renewed purpose. This is a Monet, early work, circa 1895, matches his Water Lily series. This is indeed a Klimt portrait. This appears to be an early Kandinsky pre-Blue Rider period. This might be an Egon Schiele, though I'd need additional authentication. These 2 are likely works by lesser-known Austrian artists whose collections were also looted. He straightened, looking at all 16 paintings laid out. Agent Brennan, these are authentic, without question. The materials, techniques, aging patterns, all consistent with the periods in question. More importantly, 13 of these match-documented pieces from the Rosenbaum collection, seized in 1938. This is one of the most significant restitution discoveries in decades. Martinez whistled low. $80 million was a conservative estimate then. The monetary value is irrelevant, Webb said sharply. These paintings are priceless because they're witnesses. They survived when their owners didn't. They carry memory. Elena had moved to the window, staring out at the meadow where Bess grazed peacefully. How did they get here? Why were they buried on my family's land? Cole had been investigating exactly that question. We've been researching the property's history. Your grandmother acquired this land in 1952. Yes, she bought it from a veteran, Harold something. I never knew his last name. Harold Cross, Cole supplied. Army corporal, served in the Third Army under Patton. He was part of the liberation of multiple concentration camps and storage facilities where Nazis had hoarded stolen art. According to records, he received an honorable discharge in 1946 and purchased this property using veterans' benefits. Elena turned from the window. You think this Harold Cross stole the paintings? Liberated, Webb said carefully. During the chaos at the end of the war, many soldiers took items from Nazi storage facilities. Some meant to return them through proper channels, but never did. Some kept them intentionally. The situation was complicated. He buried them and died before telling anyone, Elena said. My grandmother bought the land, never knew they were here. And they've been underground for 70 years, more or less, Cole confirmed. We're still investigating Cross's full-service record, but the timeline fits. Chen's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up with alarm. We have a problem. Our world publications are picking up on this. Someone leaked information about a major Nazi art discovery in Maine. Damn it, Cole muttered. We asked for communications blackout. These things never stay quiet, Webb said philosophically. Too many people involved, too much money at stake. Ms. Marsh, I'm afraid your privacy is about to become a casualty. Elena's face had gone pale. How long do we have? Hours, maybe, Chen said, scrolling through his phone. Once mainstream media picks it up, Then we contact Margaret now, Elena said, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. She deserves to hear about this from humans, not from journalists shouting questions. Dr. Webb, can you make the call? Webb looked at Elena with open admiration. My dear, would you like to be part of that conversation? You're the one who found them, who chose to come forward. That means something. Elena hesitated, then shook her head. This isn't about me. This is about her family getting justice, even if it's 70 years late. Just tell her I'm sorry it took so long for someone to find them. Outside, they heard vehicles approaching, more than one. Tommy appeared at the door, his expression grim. Elena, there's cars coming up the road. 3 of them. They don't look like more FBI. Cole moved to the window and swore. News vans. They'd found her even faster than he'd expected. Dr. Webb, make that call now, he ordered. Martinez, Chen, help me establish a perimeter. No one gets to the cabin without credentials. Elena stood frozen in the center of her cabin, surrounded by paintings worth millions. About to lose the anonymity she'd fought 4 years to maintain. Welcome back to the world, Miss Marsh, Cole said, not unkindly. Try to remember, you're doing the right thing. Yeah, Elena whispered, watching through the window as reporters began setting up equipment at the end of her driveway. That's what I'm afraid of. Within 24 hours, Elena's mountain sanctuary became a battlefield. Sheriff Pritchard, a weathered man in his 60s who Elena had met exactly twice in 4 years, established a perimeter at the end of her driveway, but it felt symbolic more than effective. News vans lined the dirt road. Reporters with telephoto lenses perched on neighboring properties. A helicopter had circled overhead that morning until the FAA issued a temporary flight restriction. Elena sat in her cabin, curtains drawn, feeling like an animal in a trap she'd built herself. You're trending on social media, Martinez announced, scrolling through her tablet. Some hashtag about Nazi treasure hunters. There are already think pieces about whether finders deserve compensation and, oh, this is lovely, conspiracy theories about how you've been sitting on these paintings for years. Great, Elena muttered. Exactly what I wanted. Cole was on his phone, arguing with someone about jurisdiction and media management. Dr. Webb had left the previous evening to personally deliver news to Margaret Rosenbaum, but not before the press had photographed him entering and leaving Elena's property. The speculation had gone viral. Tommy had spent the night in his truck again, self-appointed guardian, and Elena hadn't had the energy to argue. Bess remained oblivious to the chaos, contentedly chewing cud in her barn while her owner's life imploded. The knock on the door made everyone jump. Sheriff Pritchard, a familiar voice called. Got someone here, claims she needs to see Elena, says she's family. Elena's stomach dropped. Family could only mean one person. She opened the door to find her sister Rebecca standing next to the sheriff, immaculate in designer clothing that looked absurd against the mountain backdrop. Rebecca's expression was equal parts concern and frustration, a look Elena remembered well from their childhood. Rebecca, Elena said flatly, don't Rebecca me like I'm the problem here. Her sister pushed past into the cabin, stopped when she saw the FBI agents and equipment. Jesus, Elena, what have you gotten yourself into? I found stolen art and reported it, like a law-abiding citizen. Since when is that getting into something? Rebecca's laugh was sharp. Since it involves $80 million and international Holocaust restitution. Elena, there are reporters at my office in Boston asking for comments about my reclusive sister. I had to learn about this from the internet like everyone else. You couldn't call. We haven't spoken in 4 years, Elena pointed out. Since you told me I was being self-indulgent about losing my career and should just get over it and move on. I said you were wallowing in self-pity, which you were. And I was right, look at you, hiding in the mountains like some kind of hermit while the world forgot about you. Except now you've made sure the world remembers, haven't you? Cole stepped forward. Miss Marsh Sutton, I presume. Perhaps this family reunion could happen at a less critical moment. And you are? Rebecca turned her lawyer's stare on him. Special Agent Cole Brennan, FBI Art Crime Team. Is my sister in any legal trouble? No, ma'am. She's been completely cooperative. Good. Then maybe you can explain to her that she's entitled to a finder's fee for this discovery. Under salvage and treasure trove law, she could claim a significant percentage. I don't want money, Elena interrupted. How many times do I have to say that? Don't be naive. Rebecca moved to the table where the paintings lay, studying them with clinical interest. These belong to some old woman in New York who probably doesn't even need them. Don't. Elena's voice was cold. Don't reduce this to money. Margaret Rosenbaum's entire family was murdered. These paintings are all she has left of them. If you can't understand why that matters more than a payday, then we have nothing to discuss. Rebecca stared at her sister, something shifting in her expression. You really mean that? Of course I mean it. What kind of person do you think I am? I think you're the person who destroyed her own career, pursuing some moral crusade, then ran away to sulk when the world wasn't fair. I think you're someone who's so busy being right that you forget to be practical. And I think you're someone who's so practical you've forgotten what being right means. The sisters faced each other across the small cabin, years of unspoken resentment crackling between them. Another knock interrupted the standoff. Sheriff Pritchard again, looking harassed, got another visitor. This one's more concerning. Says his name is Victor Cross. Claims he represents European insurance companies with interest in these paintings. He's got documentation and legal papers. Cole's expression sharpened. Cross? As in Harold Cross? He claims to be Harold's son, Sheriff Pritchard confirmed. Says he has legitimate interest in these paintings. Like hell he does, Elena said. His father stole them, or liberated them, whatever Dr. Webb wants to call it. That doesn't give his son any rights. Actually, Rebecca interjected, her lawyer instincts activating. Depending on how the theft occurred and whether there's documentation, let him in, Cole decided. Better to know what we're dealing with. Victor Cross was in his late 60s, impeccably dressed in a suit too formal for the mountain setting. He carried a leather briefcase and had the bearing of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. His eyes went immediately to the paintings. Agent Brennan, I presume? He extended a hand. Victor Cross. I represent several European insurance companies who originally paid out claims on these pieces after the war. Under subrogation rights, my clients have legitimate interest in any recovered property. That's convenient, Elena said coldly. And timely. How did you find out about this so quickly? Victor's smile was practiced. I've had alerts set for any major Nazi art discoveries for 30 years. Miss Marsh, this is what I do. Facilitate the return of looted art while ensuring all parties' interests are protected. All parties except the actual owners. Elena shot back. The actual owners are dead, Victor said bluntly. Their heirs have moral claims, certainly, but legal ownership of artwork worth this much becomes complicated. Insurance companies paid out millions in 1946. They have legal rights to recovered property under salvage law. Cole crossed his arms. Mr. Cross, you mentioned your father was Harold Cross, the soldier who originally hid these paintings? Something flickered in Victor's expression, quickly suppressed. Yes, my father was with the Third Army. He liberated several Nazi storage facilities and brought these paintings home instead of reporting them through proper channels, Elena said. That's called theft. That's called survival, Victor countered. My father watched concentration camp survivors fight over scraps. He saw warehouses full of stolen property with no clear system for returning it. He took these paintings to protect them until proper channels could be established. Then he died in 1972 without telling anyone where they were. I've spent most of my adult life trying to find them. So you could sell them, Eleanor accused, so I could complete what my father started. Victor's voice carried an edge now. You judge him from 70 years' distance, but you weren't there. You didn't see the chaos. My father saved these paintings from being destroyed or vanishing into Soviet collections. Yes, he should have reported them. Yes, he made mistakes. But his son trying to facilitate their proper return isn't villainy, Miss Marsh. It's completing his unfinished business. The cabin fell silent. Elena wanted to argue, but something in Victor's expression, genuine grief over his father's choices, made her hesitate. "The paintings belong to Margaret Rosenbaum," Cole said firmly. "That's not up for debate. What is debatable is whether any insurance companies have legitimate claims to partial proceeds, and whether Mr. Cross here is actually representing those companies or himself. I have documentation." Victor began reaching for his briefcase. "Which we'll examine thoroughly," Cole interrupted. "But not here, not now. Ms. Marsh's property is already a circus. If you have legitimate claims, file them through proper legal channels." Victor studied Cole, then nodded slowly. "I understand. But Agent Brennan, you should know, I'm not the only person who's been searching for these paintings. Word is spreading in certain circles that might not be as principled about legal channels. Is that a threat?" Martinez asked sharply. "It's a warning. The art underworld is small and well-connected. If I found out about this discovery, others have too. People who won't wait for restitution tribunals or legal process." Victor looked at Elena. "You've made yourself a target. Ms. Marsh, I hope you understand that." Before anyone could respond, Tommy burst through the door. "Elena, there's a helicopter landing in your upper meadow. Not news, it's private, expensive looking. And there's a guy with a drone flying it over your property, live streaming everything," Cole swore. "Chen Martinez with me? Sheriff, we need that drone brought down now." As they rushed out, Rebecca moved closer to Elena. "You need private security, legal representation. You're in over your head." "I know," Elena admitted quietly, watching through the window as a sleek black helicopter descended into her meadow. The same meadow where Bess had found the paintings. "I knew this would happen. I thought I could handle it." "You can't handle it alone," Rebecca said, and for the first time her voice carried something other than criticism. "That's not weakness, Elena. That's reality. Let me help. I have resources, connections. You think I'm being naive and self-righteous. I think you're being brave and stupid in equal measure, which has always been your most infuriating quality." Rebecca actually smiled slightly. "But you're my sister. And maybe I was wrong about some things. 4 years ago, about what happened in Philadelphia." Eleanor turned to stare at her sister. "What?" "I looked into it. After I saw the news about this, I contacted some of your old colleagues, read the original stories. You were right, Elena, about the housing corruption, the cover-up, all of it. I just didn't want to admit it, because admitting it meant acknowledging you'd sacrificed your career for truth, and I told you to just move on." The confession hung between them. Years of resentment suddenly shifting into something else. Outside, they heard shouting. Cole was confronting whoever had arrived in the helicopter. Tommy was arguing with someone about the drone. Sheriff Pritchard was calling for backup on his radio. Elena's sanctuary, her carefully constructed isolation, was being torn apart by forces she'd invited in by choosing to do the right thing. "I'm scared," Elena admitted. "I'm really scared, Rebecca." "I know." Rebecca did something she hadn't done in years. She hugged her sister. "But you're not alone anymore. For better or worse, you've got me now. And probably those FBI agents. And definitely that lovesick firewood delivery guy. So stop trying to handle everything by yourself." Through the window, Elena watched a man in an expensive suit emerge from the helicopter, surveying her property with the confidence of someone who believed everything had a price. Victor Cross stepped beside them, also watching. "That's Damon Price," he said quietly. "One of the most dangerous art dealers in the world. If he's here, things are about to get much worse." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Worse than reporters and insurance claims and public scrutiny?" "Much worse," Victor confirmed. "Price doesn't take no for an answer. And he plays for keeps," as if to punctuate the point. The drone operator, a young man with expensive camera equipment and a YouTube logo on his shirt, was tackled by Tommy, creating a scene that would undoubtedly go viral within hours. Elena closed her eyes. "I just wanted to return some paintings to a woman who'd lost her family." "I know," Rebecca said. "But you've stumbled into something much bigger. The question now is, what are you willing to do to finish what you started?" Elena opened her eyes, looked at the Klimt portrait still propped against her counter. Sarah Rosenbaum's elegant face, preserved through decades of darkness. "Whatever it takes," she said. "Margaret Rosenbaum is getting her mother's portrait back. I don't care what it costs me." Outside, Cole was shouting at Damon Price to leave the property. Tommy was being restrained by Sheriff Pritchard. The YouTube personality was filming everything, narrating breathlessly about treasure hunters and mountain mysteries. Elena's quiet life was over. The only question remaining was whether she'd survive what came next. The car service arrived early the next morning, before most of the reporters had finished their coffee. Cole had arranged it, a discreet black sedan that could bypass the media circus through a fire access road on the property's far side. Elena watched from her window as an elderly woman emerged from the vehicle with careful dignity, accepting the driver's steadying hand, but moving with clear independence. Margaret Rosenbaum was smaller than Elena had imagined, dressed simply but elegantly, her white hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a worn leather handbag and wore a Star of David pendant that caught the morning light. "She's here," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole, who'd barely left the property since Price's arrival yesterday, nodded. "Are you ready?" "No." Elena's hands were shaking. "How do you prepare to meet someone and tell them you found their murdered parents' paintings?" "You don't," Rebecca said from the couch, where she'd spent the night after refusing to leave. "You just do your best." Dr. Webb had returned with Margaret. He emerged from the car after her, moving to her side with protective familiarity. They spoke quietly for a moment, Webb gesturing toward the cabin. Margaret nodding and squaring her shoulders. Elena opened the door before they could knock. For a long moment, the two women simply looked at each other. Elena saw a survivor, someone who'd endured unimaginable loss and built a life anyway. What Margaret saw in Elena, she couldn't guess. "Ms. Marsh," Margaret said, her accent carrying traces of Vienna beneath decades of American English. "Dr. Webb tells me you found my family's paintings." "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry about everything. About what happened to your family. About how long they were hidden. About child." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "You have nothing to apologize for. May I see them?" Elena stepped aside, letting Margaret enter. Rebecca and Cole moved back, giving the elderly woman space. The paintings lay on the table, carefully arranged, the Klimt portrait of Sarah Rosenbaum positioned prominently. Margaret walked slowly to the table, her steps measured. She passed the other paintings without looking at them, her attention fixed on the portrait. When she reached it, she stopped. For a long moment, she simply stared. Then, with trembling hands, she reached out and touched the frame, gently, reverently, as one might touch something holy. "Mutti," Margaret whispered in German. "Meine Mutti." The cabin held its breath. Margaret traced the portrait's frame, her fingers finding familiar paths. "I was 7 when Klimt painted this. He came to our apartment. I thought he was funny-looking, so serious and intense. My mother sat for him for days. She wore her green dress, the one with the beading. I played at her feet while he worked." Her voice was steady, but tears ran freely down her weathered cheeks. "We hung it in the music room. I saw it every day. When the Nazis came to catalogue our collection, I watched them number it, photograph it, put it on their lists. I was 12. I understood enough to know we were losing everything." She moved to the next painting, a small landscape. "This hung in my father's study. He'd look at it while thinking through problems at the bank. He said it helped him remember there was beauty in the world, even when numbers didn't balance." Another painting, another memory. This was Rachel's favorite, my sister. She died at 23 in Ravensbrück. She used to stand in front of it and make up stories about the people in the scene. Margaret worked her way through each painting, speaking softly in a mixture of English and German, reconstructing her family through the objects they'd loved. Dr. Webb stood nearby, occasionally translating, his own eyes wet with tears. Elena found herself crying too, understanding for the first time what these paintings actually represented. Not value or treasure, but a family's life, frozen and preserved through catastrophe. Finally, Margaret returned to her mother's portrait. She spoke to it in German, a long, quiet conversation that nobody interrupted. When she finished, she turned to face Elena. "Thank you," Margaret said simply, "for not keeping them, for not selling them, for calling authorities when you could have done otherwise. Dr. Webb told me about your past, about what happened in Philadelphia. I know what it cost you to come forward again. It was the only choice," Elena managed. "No," Margaret shook her head. "It was the right choice. Those are different things. You had other options, legal ones even. You chose justice instead of safety. That's rare." She reached out and took Elena's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "My parents were murdered for being Jewish. Our home was destroyed. Our life was stolen. But I survived, Ms. Marsh. I married, had children, built a career as a teacher. I have grandchildren who are doctors and lawyers and artists. Hitler wanted to erase us. Instead, we flourished." Margaret squeezed Elena's hand. "These paintings are witnesses to what was done to us. But they're also witnesses to what survived: beauty, memory, love. My mother sitting for Klimt, while her youngest daughter played at her feet. My father contemplating landscapes in his study. Rachel imagining stories. All of that lives in these objects. They belong to you," Elena said. "Whatever legal complications arise, whatever insurance companies or dealers claim, these are yours." "Yes," Margaret agreed, "but not for the reasons you might think. I don't need them to remember my family. I carry them here," she touched her heart. "I want them returned because bearing witness matters. These paintings survived the Nazis, survived decades underground, survived to tell their story. They deserve to be seen, to be remembered, to teach people what hatred destroys." She looked around the cabin, at Cole and Rebecca and Webb, then back to Elena. "Dr. Webb tells me there are people trying to prevent me from claiming these. People who see value instead of memory." "Damon Price," Cole confirmed. "He's filed preliminary legal claims, suggesting the provenance is unclear. It's nonsense, but it could tie the paintings up in courts for years." "Then we don't let him," Margaret said, with the steel of someone who'd survived greater threats than lawyers. "My family didn't endure the Holocaust, so some art dealer could profit from our suffering 70 years later." "Mrs. Rosenbaum," Rebecca said, stepping forward. "I'm Rebecca Marsh Sutton, Elena's sister. I'm an attorney specializing in international property law. If you'd allow me, I'd like to represent you in this matter." "Pro bono?" Margaret studied Rebecca with sharp eyes. "Why?" "Because my sister just taught me something about doing the right thing, even when it's costly. And because someone needs to pay for being an insufferable pragmatist for the past 4 years. This seems like appropriate penance." A smile flickered across Margaret's face, the first Elena had seen. "I accept. Now what do we do about Mr. Price?" "We move the paintings before he can prevent it," Cole said. "There's an international Holocaust restitution tribunal with expedited procedures for clear-cut cases like this. If we can get the paintings there, they'll confirm your ownership within days instead of years. And Price will try to stop us," Webb added. "He has resources, connections, people who don't care about legality. Then we outthink him," Margaret said simply. "I've survived Nazis' displacement, starting over with nothing. I can certainly outsmart one greedy art dealer." Victor Cross, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, spoke up. "Mrs. Rosenbaum, I want to apologize for my father. He should have returned these paintings through proper channels. What he did, keeping them hidden, was wrong, even if his intentions were complicated." Margaret turned to face him. "Your father liberated these from Nazi storage?" "Yes, ma'am. Then he saved them from destruction or worse. Yes, he should have returned them. Yes, he made mistakes. But he also preserved my family's memory when he could have simply looked away." Margaret moved closer to Victor. "Your father was human. Humans make imperfect choices in impossible situations. What matters now is what you do." "I want to help," Victor said quietly. "I've spent 30 years searching for these paintings, trying to complete what my father started. Let me help get them to the tribunal. I know the art underworld, know how Price operates. I can be useful. Can we trust him?" Martinez asked Cole quietly. "Do we have a choice?" Cole responded. "Price has money and connections. We need every advantage. Elena watched Margaret considering Victor's offer, saw the calculation happening behind wise eyes. This woman had learned to read people in situations where misreading meant death. If she trusted Victor, that meant something. "All right," Margaret said finally. "We work together, all of us." She looked around the cabin at this unlikely coalition formed by chance and necessity. "My parents believed in community, in people working together against darkness. Let's honor that." Outside, they heard shouting. More reporters had found the fire road. Tommy appeared at the door, breathless. "Elena, Price is back. He's got lawyers, and they're demanding access to the paintings for independent authentication. Sheriff says he can't keep them out much longer without a court order." Margaret's expression hardened. "Then we move them now, tonight, before he can stop us." "It's risky," Cole warned. "If anything goes wrong, everything is risky," Margaret interrupted. "Living is risky, but doing nothing guarantees Price wins. I didn't survive the Holocaust to lose my family's paintings to bureaucracy and greed." She looked at Elena, and something passed between them. Understanding, solidarity, the recognition of kindred determination. "Miss Marsh, you've protected these paintings this far. Will you help me take them the rest of the way home?" Elena thought about her destroyed career, her 4 years of hiding, her sister's accusation that she wallowed in self-pity instead of moving forward. She thought about choosing safety over justice, isolation over connection, fear over courage. "Yes," she said. "Whatever it takes." Margaret smiled, a real smile this time, one that transformed her face from sorrowful to fierce. "Good. Then let's show Mr. Price what mistakes he's made by threatening survivors." The plan formed quickly out of necessity. Cole would arrange an official FBI transport as a decoy, a convoy with proper security that would leave at dawn, drawing media and anyone watching. Meanwhile, the real paintings would be moved at night by Victor and Tommy in an unmarked delivery truck, taking back roads toward the regional Holocaust restitution office 3 states away. Rebecca would file emergency motions to block Price's legal maneuvers, buying them a 12-hour window. Dr. Webb would travel separately with documentation. Elena and Margaret would follow in Eleanor's old pickup, staying off main routes. It was risky, improvised, and probably violated a dozen FBI protocols. Cole's supervisor had made that abundantly clear during their last phone call, but before any of it could happen, Damon Price made his move. The helicopter returned at sunset, landing with the same aggressive confidence as before. This time, Price didn't bother with the fire road. He simply landed in Elena's meadow, technically legal since it was uncontrolled airspace, and walked down to the cabin as if he owned it. Elena was outside when he arrived, having just finished helping Tommy load firewood. She watched him approach, expensive suit, confident stride, the kind of smile that probably charmed art collectors and intimidated rivals. "Miss Marsh," he called out warmly, as if they were old friends. "I was hoping we could talk, just the two of us, without all the noise and complications. I have nothing to say to you. I think you do." Price stopped a respectful distance away, hands in his pockets, non-threatening. "May I?" He gestured toward her porch. Against her better judgment, Elena nodded. Tommy moved closer, protective, but she waved him back. Price settled into one of her porch chairs with easy familiarity, pulling out a bottle of wine from his jacket. "I brought a gift. Bordeaux, 1995. I thought we could talk like civilized people. I don't drink with people trying to steal Holocaust survivors' property." "Steal?" Price looked genuinely offended. "Ms. Marsh, may I call you Elena? I'm not stealing anything. I'm offering you a fair price for something you found on your property. They're not mine to sell. Legally, that's debatable. You found them on land your family has owned for 70 years. Depending on how the courts interpret salvage and treasure trove law, they belong to Margaret Rosenbaum," Elena interrupted. "Her family's name is in the provenance records. There's no debate." Price sighed, setting the wine down. "Let me be direct, since you seem to prefer it. I'm prepared to offer you $20 million cash, transferred to any account you specify within 24 hours. No legal battles, no media circus, no years of litigation. Just a clean transaction, and you go back to your quiet mountain life." Elena felt her stomach clench.
20 million.
She could disappear completely, go anywhere, never worry about money again, never have to face the people who destroyed her career, never have to be vulnerable to the world's judgment. Price watched her face, reading her reaction with professional skill. I've done my research on you, Elena. Philadelphia, the housing corruption story. Your source, what was his name? Marcus Chen, found dead in what police ruled a suicide. Except you never believed that, did you? Elena's blood went cold. How do you know about Marcus? I know a lot of things. I know the city officials you exposed are still in power, still influential, still very unhappy about what you tried to do. I know your editor, James Rothstein, actively worked to discredit you, to save the paper's relationship with those officials. I know your colleagues watched it happen and said nothing because they valued their careers more than the truth. He leaned forward slightly. I also know things that weren't in the papers. I know Marcus called you 3 times the night before he died. I know he told you he was being followed, that he'd received threats. I know you blame yourself for not taking it more seriously. Elena couldn't breathe. These were details only she and the police knew, details that had haunted her for 4 years. How? I have resources, Price said simply. Connections. People who know things. The point is, Elena, I understand what you've been through. I understand why you ran here, why you've spent 4 years hiding. And I'm telling you, if you push forward with this restitution, if you put yourself back in the spotlight, those same powerful people will notice. They'll remember. And they might wonder if you've spent these years gathering more evidence, preparing another exposé. It wasn't quite a threat. The tone was almost sympathetic. But the implication was crystal clear. Choosing visibility was choosing danger. You're trying to scare me into selling, Elena said, forcing her voice steady. I'm trying to help you see reality. You did the right thing once, and it destroyed you. Marcus Chen did the right thing and he died. The world isn't fair, Elena. It doesn't reward martyrs. It crushes them. Price pulled out a business card, set it on the porch railing. 20 million. Anonymity. Safety. All you have to do is let me handle the paintings. Mrs. Rosenbaum will get her due. I'm not a monster. But you get to survive with something to show for your trouble, and if I refuse. Price's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you're choosing to make this difficult. For yourself, for Mrs. Rosenbaum, for everyone involved. Legal battles can drag on for years. Evidence can be challenged. Provenance can be disputed. And accidents, he paused. Well, accidents happen in isolated places. Fires, break-ins, tragic losses. There it was. The actual threat, delivered with a shrug. Get off my property, Elena said quietly. Price stood unruffled. Think about it. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, things get complicated. He walked back toward his helicopter, leaving the wine bottle and business card behind. Tommy appeared at Elena's side the moment Price was gone. What did he say? Are you okay? He offered me money. Then he threatened me. Elena stared at the business card. He knew things about Philadelphia, about Marcus, things that were never public. How is that possible? Money, connections, the same way powerful people always know things. Elena felt her hands shaking again, the old fear rising. He's right, Tommy. If I push this, if I go public again, the people who destroyed my career will notice. They might come after me again. They might. She stopped, unable to voice the fear. They might do to her what they did to Marcus. Tommy's jaw tightened. So what, you just let him win? Let him steal from that old woman? Of course not. Eleanor's voice cracked. I'm scared, Tommy, I'm really scared. I thought I could do this, thought I could be brave enough, but he's right about everything. The world crushed me once already. What if it does it again? Then we're here, Tommy said fiercely. Me, your sister, those FBI agents, Dr. Webb. You're not alone this time, Elena. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Inside the cabin, Elena found the others gathered around the table. Victor was reviewing maps of alternate routes. Rebecca was on her phone with lawyers. Cole was coordinating with his team. Margaret sat in the corner, quietly reading a book, serene despite the chaos. Price made his offer, Elena announced. 20 million. And when I refused, he made threats. But fires, accidents, the dangers of isolation, Cole's expression darkened. That's actionable. You can't prove anything, Victor interrupted. Price is too smart to make explicit threats. It'll be his word against hers, and he has better lawyers. He also knew things about Philadelphia, Elena continued. About my source's death, details that weren't public. Either he's connected to the people who destroyed my career, or he has access to their information. Rebecca set down her phone. That means he's more dangerous than we thought. If he has those connections, then we need to move tonight, Margaret said calmly, looking up from her book. Before he can prepare further obstacles, Mrs. Rosenbaum, if Price is willing to threaten physical harm, Agent Brennan, I survived the Holocaust by not letting fear paralyze me. Margaret stood, moving to the window where Bess grazed peacefully in the twilight. Mr. Price thinks he can bully us because he has money and connections. But he's forgotten something important. People who've already lost everything have nothing left to lose. She turned to face the room, and Elena saw the steel that had carried this woman through unimaginable horrors. My parents died in camps. My siblings died in camps. I hid in a cellar for 2 years, not knowing if each day would be my last. I came to America with nothing but memories and determination. I built a life. I raised children. I taught thousands of students. I survived, Margaret's voice grew stronger. And now some art dealer thinks he can intimidate me. He doesn't know who he's dealing with. None of you do. She looked at Elena specifically. You're frightened. That's human. But you're also stronger than you think. You proved that by calling the FBI instead of keeping the paintings. You proved it by standing up to your sister when she told you to take the money. You'll prove it again by seeing this through. What if he's right? Elena asked quietly. What if doing the right thing destroys me again? Then you'll survive again, Margaret said simply. Because that's what we do. We survive, and we bear witness, and we refuse to let evil win through intimidation. The room fell silent. Outside, Price's helicopter lifted off, the sound of its rotors fading into the mountain evening. Victor Cross spoke into the quiet. Price will have people watching the roads, standard surveillance on the FBI convoy. But he won't expect us to move tonight before the official transport. That's our advantage. How do we know he doesn't have people watching right now? Martinez asked. Because I've been doing counter-surveillance all day, Victor said. Old habits from my intelligence days. There's a news van at the end of the driveway and one photographer in the woods to the east. No one else. Price is confident. He thinks his threats worked. That's his mistake, Cole considered this. If we move tonight, we go without backup, without official protocols. If something goes wrong, then something goes wrong, Margaret interrupted. But at least we tried. At least we didn't surrender to fear. Elena looked around the cabin, at these people who'd become unlikely allies. Her estranged sister using legal expertise to help. Tommy willing to drive all night to protect paintings he'd never seen. Victor trying to redeem his father's complicated legacy. Cole risking his career to pursue justice over procedure. Dr. Webb lending his knowledge and connections. And Margaret, survivor of the Holocaust, refusing to be victimized again. She thought about Marcus Chen, who'd trusted her with evidence and paid the ultimate price. About the families in Philadelphia whose children suffered lead poisoning while officials got rich. About the Rosenbaum family, murdered for being Jewish, their possessions stolen and scattered. Price was right that doing the right thing had costs. But Margaret was right that surrender had costs too. To the soul, to the self, to the very idea that justice mattered. All right, Elena said. We move tonight, all of us. And whatever Price does, we deal with it together. Tommy grinned. Now you're talking. Rebecca actually smiled. Finally, some of the old Elena I remember. The one who didn't know how to quit. I knew how to quit, Elena corrected. I just forgot why I shouldn't. Margaret crossed the cabin and took Elena's hands. Thank you, she said simply, for being brave enough to be afraid and do it anyway. Outside, darkness was falling. They had perhaps 3 hours before someone would notice increased activity. 3 hours to load 16 priceless paintings into a delivery truck and begin a journey that would either end in justice or catastrophe. Cole began issuing instructions. Victor and Tommy would drive the truck. Rebecca would leave first, heading to the court filing office to submit emergency motions. Webb would take a commercial flight to the restitution tribunal to prepare them. Elena and Margaret would follow in Elena's pickup, staying off highways. "What about Price's surveillance?" Martinez asked. "Let them watch the FBI convoy tomorrow," Cole said. "By the time they realize it's empty, we'll be 3 states away." As they began carefully wrapping paintings for transport, Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of purpose alongside it. She was terrified, but she was also determined, and surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with her. That had to be enough. Outside, Bess lowed peacefully, oblivious to the drama unfolding around her. The cow that had started everything by wandering off the path and finding a collapsed piece of ground. Sometimes, Elena thought, the most important discoveries came from following stubborn animals into unexpected places. And sometimes courage meant accepting that you were scared and moving forward anyway. "All right," she said, lifting the Klimt portrait with careful hands. "Let's bring these paintings home." They moved with careful urgency, wrapping each painting in protective layers, bubble wrap Tommy had brought from town, blankets from Elena's cabin, waterproof tarps in case of rain. Victor had produced custom-built crates from somewhere, explaining tersely that he'd been prepared for this moment for 30 years. By 9 p.m., the truck was loaded. Tommy checked the engine twice, paranoid about breakdowns. Victor reviewed their route one final time. Back roads through New Hampshire and Vermont, avoiding toll booths with cameras, stopping only for gas at small stations unlikely to have sophisticated surveillance. "You sure about this?" Tommy asked Elena as they secured the final crate. "Once we're gone, if Price figures it out, I know." Elena looked at her cabin, at the life she'd built here. It suddenly felt fragile, temporary. "But we're out of options." Rebecca left first, her rental car heading toward the nearest city with a federal courthouse. She'd file the emergency motions at midnight when they opened for after-hours filings, buying them their narrow window. Dr. Webb departed next, driven by one of Cole's agents to the airport. He carried documentation that would prove provenance to the tribunal. The pre-war photographs, insurance records, authentication reports. Then Tommy and Victor pulled out in the truck, moving slowly down the rutted drive without headlights until they reached the main road. Cole's team would create the decoy convoy at dawn, drawing attention while the real cargo was already hours away, which left Elena, Margaret, Cole, Martinez, and Chen in the cabin, waiting for their own departure time. That's when Jackson Harrow made his move. The YouTuber had been camping on adjacent property for days, documenting the mountain treasure mystery for his millions of followers. His drone footage had already gone viral. His speculation about hidden caches and government cover-ups had spawned conspiracy theories across social media, and apparently he'd decided passive documentation wasn't enough. Elena heard Bess first, the cow's distressed lowing cutting through the night. She moved to the window and saw lights in her barn, saw movement. "Someone's in there," she said sharply. Cole was already moving, Martinez and Chen behind him. "Stay inside," he ordered Elena and Margaret, but Elena couldn't stay inside. That was her barn, her property, her cow. She grabbed a flashlight and followed. Ignoring Cole's cursed protest, she found Jackson Harrow in Bess's stall, camera equipment in hand, filming himself examining the ground where Elena had stored the lockbox temporarily before bringing it inside. "This is the exact spot where the treasure was hidden," Harrow was saying to his camera, his voice breathless with manufactured excitement. "You can see where the earth was disturbed. What the hell are you doing in my barn?" Elena's voice was cold fury. Harrow spun, and she saw calculation flash across his face before he rearranged it into sheepish charm. "Ms. Marsh, I was just documenting the historical site. You're trespassing. Get out. The public has a right to know. The public has a right to nothing on my private property." Elena moved closer, and Bess, sensing her owner's anger, stomped nervously. "You're scaring my cow and invading my space. Leave. Now." Harrow didn't move. Instead, he turned his camera on Elena. "Is it true you're planning to move the paintings tonight? My sources say there's been unusual activity." Elena felt ice in her stomach. If Harrow knew, if he'd been filming, if his followers were watching live. "Turn that camera off," Cole commanded, appearing behind Elena with his badge out. "Sir, you're trespassing on private property and interfering with a federal investigation. I have First Amendment rights. You have the right to film from public property, not from inside someone's barn at night." Cole's voice carried authority that brooked no argument. "You have 3 seconds to leave before I arrest you for obstruction." Harrow's expression shifted from charming to ugly. "You can't silence the truth. My viewers deserve to know what's really happening here. Government agents, mysterious art, a discredited journalist. This whole thing stinks of corruption." Tommy appeared from the darkness behind Harrow, and Elena saw murder in his eyes. "Tommy, don't," she started, too late. Tommy grabbed Harrow's shoulder, spinning him around. "You heard the lady and the federal agent." "Get out," Harrow jerked away. "Don't touch me. That's assault." "This is assault," Tommy said, and punched him. It wasn't a hard punch, more of a shove with a fist, but Harrow went down dramatically, his camera clattering to the barn floor. And because the universe had a cruel sense of timing, the camera kept recording. "You attacked me." Harrow's voice shifted to victimhood, playing to his audience. "Everyone saw that." "Unprovoked violence from the mountain locals. You were trespassing," Tommy started. "I was documenting a story, and now you've assaulted me on camera." Harrow was already reaching for his phone, probably to call 911 or upload the footage, or both. Cole moved fast, placing himself between Tommy and Harrow. "Mr. Harrow, you need medical attention?" "My jaw. He could have broken my jaw." "He barely touched you," Elena said. But even as she spoke, she knew it didn't matter. The optics were terrible. Local man attacks journalist documenting a story. Never mind that Harrow was a YouTuber trespassing at night, not a legitimate journalist. Never mind that he'd been invading Elena's privacy for days. The video would tell whatever story Harrow wanted. Sheriff Pritchard arrived within 15 minutes, lights flashing. By then, Harrow had posted the video with the caption, "Attacked for seeking the truth." Mountain locals turned violent. It already had 50,000 views. "Tommy, I'm going to need you to come with me," Pritchard said wearily. "Harrow's pressing charges." "Sheriff, he was trespassing," Elena protested. "I know, but he's got video of Tommy hitting him, and he's threatening to sue everyone, including my department, if I don't make an arrest." "I'm sorry, Tommy." Elena watched in horror as Pritchard put Tommy in handcuffs. This was her fault. Tommy had been protecting her property, and now he was being arrested because she'd found the paintings, because she'd called the FBI, because she'd set all of this in motion. "I'll fix this," she told Tommy as Pritchard led him away. "I promise, just get those paintings where they need to go," Tommy said. "That's what matters." After they left, Eleanor stood in her barn with Bess, feeling everything crash down around her. The video was viral. Tommy was arrested. Their careful plan was potentially compromised. If Harrow's viewers were watching, if Price saw the footage, he'd know something was happening tonight. Rebecca arrived back earlier than expected, finding Elena sitting on the barn floor with her head in her hands. "I saw the video," Rebecca said quietly, sitting beside her sister. 50 million views in 3 hours. It's everywhere. Tommy's arrested. Harrow's playing victim. The whole world thinks we're violent conspiracy theorists hiding something. Elena's voice was hollow. "I did this. I brought this chaos into people's lives? No. You found stolen art and tried to return it. That's not chaos, that's justice. Everything else is people being terrible because people are often terrible. Marcus died because I pursued justice. Now Tommy's arrested. What's next? What else am I going to destroy?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "Then, you want to know what I think really happened to Marcus Chen?" Elena looked up sharply. "I hired a private investigator. After I saw the news about the paintings. After I realized I'd been wrong about Philadelphia. I had him look into Marcus's death." Rebecca pulled out her phone, showed Elena a detailed report. The police ruled it suicide, but there were inconsistencies. Defensive wounds that didn't match. A witness who reported seeing two men leaving Marcus's apartment. The detective who closed the case got promoted suspiciously fast afterward. Elena felt her hands shaking as she read. Why are you showing me this? Because you've spent 4 years blaming yourself for Marcus's death. But Elena, you didn't kill him. Corrupt officials did. Powerful people protecting their interests did. You exposed truth, and they responded with violence. That's on them, not you. I could have protected him better. You could have done nothing differently, Rebecca interrupted. Sometimes bad things happen because bad people have power. You're not responsible for evil committed by others. Inside the cabin, Cole's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. When he hung up, he gathered everyone together. That was Victor. They've been followed for the last 30 miles. Black SUV, no plates, professional tail. Prices people, almost certainly. Can they lose them? Elena asked. Victor says yes, but it'll take them off the planned route. They might not make it to the tribunal by morning. Margaret, who'd been sitting quietly through the entire crisis, finally spoke. Then we create another diversion. Agent Brennan, what if I gave a press conference right now? Drew all attention here while Victor and Tommy disappear into the back roads. Mrs. Rosenbaum, that would expose you to what? Media questions? I've survived worse. Margaret stood, straightening her cardigan with determination. Call those reporters at the end of the driveway. Tell them I'm giving an exclusive interview about my family's paintings. Every camera will turn here, every viewer will watch me, and in the chaos, one delivery truck becomes invisible. Cole considered this. It could work. But you'd be painting a target on yourself. If Price sees you as an obstacle, let him try. Margaret's voice carried steel. I'm 87 years old. I've outlived Nazis, outlived everyone who tried to erase my family. I'm not afraid of one art dealer. Elena stared at this elderly woman. Survivor, fighter, someone who turned every threat into determination. You're remarkable. I'm furious, Margaret corrected. Fury is quite motivating at my age. Shall we make some news, Agent Brennan? Within an hour, Margaret Rosenbaum sat on Elena's porch, surrounded by cameras and reporters telling her story. She spoke about her family's art collection, about watching Nazis catalogue every possession, about hiding in a cellar while her parents and siblings died. She spoke about America, about building a life, about never expecting to see these paintings again. She spoke with such eloquence, such dignity, such raw truth, that the interview went viral faster than Harrow's assault video. News networks picked it up. Social media exploded with shares. The story stopped being about mountain mysteries and became about Holocaust survival and justice delayed. And while the world watched Margaret, Victor and Tommy drove through Vermont back roads, losing their tail in the labyrinth of rural routes, pushing toward their destination. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.